Good morning. I appreciate you guys being here. People in the comment section already. Good morning, Cat and chat. I love when that's a thing that you guys have started. Cat and chat. Good morning. I kind of like it. The cat chat. You guys can always throw in your chats, super chats. We get to your chats here after about a couple of stories. I've got a lot this morning, and you're just gonna have to bear with me. I know I sound probably pretty nasally. I'm sick. Ugh. It's kind of like developed to where it's just like a cough now. So I'm hoping I can like make it through this without like hacking my guts up. Um, yeah, it's that time of year. Cold season is upon us. So yeah, I'm not happy about it, but I'm pushing my vitamin C and doing what I can. So we are going to be talking about Bessent, Scott Bessent. He's the treasurer, and he is bringing the fire on this fraud scandal, the fire on Minnesota. We talked a lot about the Minnesota fraud scandal. I've been covering this at length. Ilhan Omar, she gave some pretty bad answers last week. She said essentially like, oh, because COVID, we created all kinds of programs and it was kind of impossible to ensure that these programs were being run efficiently. And I'm paraphrasing, but like she blamed COVID as to why there was a ton of fraud. So Ilhan Omar, she gave some more bad answers over the weekend to really good questions. So we're going to get to that. We're also going to get to Pearl Harbor. The Pearl Harbor survivors, there are only 12 of them, and they're all in their like hundreds. Okay, which is crazy to think about. That's how long ago Pearl Harbor was. Pearl Harbor survivors, they are going to be absent from this memorial type service in Hawaii. And I think that this marks a shift in remembrance. And we have to remember Pearl Harbor, and we have to kind of file it under Take Note America, Remember This America, Don't Repeat This America. And I'm going to be chatting about that today, Pearl Harbor. I also want to talk about X. Okay, so Elon Musk, he had like a one-word response for the EU, the European Union. This is big deal today. This is probably the top story. Kind of hilarious. An X representative got out there and gave the perfect response to the EU, because the EU issued a $140 million fine to X for essentially not censoring people. So we're going to get to all of that. I also want to make sure that we get to Cook County. They've got this guaranteed income thing. So like if you're of low income in Cook County, Illinois, you will be guaranteed some sort of income. And of course, that income is taxpayer cash. Now, Governor J.B. Pritzker was asked if this was going to happen at a state level rather than just a Cook County level, and he said no. And I'll tell you why he said no, probably because he's thinking about 2028 run. And if you're for guaranteed income, you're essentially a communist socialist. But who knows? Zoran Mamdani, he was all about guaranteed income, government-run grocery stores, and he got elected. So I don't know. JB, he's trying to present himself as a moderate. A national office is a lot different than the New York City mayoral position. So he is trying to present himself more and more and more as a moderate. The Illinois Democrats, or the Cook County Democrats, they're pushing handouts with zero work requirement or zero citizenship requirement, by the way. Okay, so you can get this guaranteed income. You just have to be a low income individual. And that's the only requirement. You don't have to be working. You don't have to have citizenship in this country. And you can get that guaranteed income in Cook County, Illinois. That, for those of you not in Illinois, that is the Chicago County. Okay. So let's talk about the Minnesota fraud first. That has had a big spotlight on it over this last week. And now the Treasury, they're looking into this and they're opening up an investigation. So the fraud was really massive here. It involved reportedly over $1 billion in taxpayer dollars. And there are many questions as to how this happened and why this was allowed to happen. So Tim Walz is being investigated by the House Oversight Committee, the Treasury Department, for his hand in letting it go on. So Secretary Scott Bessent said that they are looking into the reports that the money may have been diverted to a terrorist organization, Al-Shabaab. I've kind of explained this in detail, how they do it. And, I wouldn't be surprised if it's happening here in Illinois and in every state. It's through these nonprofit organizations. And I showed you how they did it with this one. It's called Feeding the Future or Feeding Our Future. It's a nonprofit organization run by Somali immigrants. Then you get the taxpayer money funneled into that nonprofit to do good, but then they lie and then they enrich themselves. They could buy themselves fancy cars, or they take that money and, in this case, diverted it to a terrorist organization, which is being investigated. So allegedly diverted it to a terrorist organization. Both Bessent and Ilhan Omar, they appeared on Margaret Brennan's Face the Nation. So I want to play some clips here, but Margaret, she had asked Ilhan Omar, sorry, blending words together. She had asked Omar about how the fraud looks like it has been perpetrated by Somali immigrants, and her response was great. She argued that Somalis were victims in this, that the actual criminals who perpetrated this fraud were victimized because they had no idea that they weren't allowed to commit fraud and take taxpayer dollars to enrich themselves or send it over to their terrorist buddies in Somalia. Right, apparently. So Margaret Brennan, she asked Ilhan Omar about the fraud and about it being perpetrated by Somalis. Take a listen.
Of the 87 people charged, all but 8 are of Somali descent. And that has added to the spotlight being put specifically on your community. Why do you think this fraud was allowed to get so widespread?
Well, I want to say, this also has an impact on Somalis because we are also taxpayers in Minnesota. We also could have benefited from the program and the money that was stolen. And so it's been really frustrating for people to not acknowledge the fact that we're also as Minnesotans, as taxpayers, really upset and angry about the fraud that has occurred.
Of the 87 people charged, all but 8.
Deflection. That was a deflection away from the question. She asked specifically about the perpetrators being Somalian, and she didn't answer, as to why that is. And yeah, it was a deflection because the question was about the perpetrators and why they weren't stopped sooner. And I think it's odd that most of the perpetrators, she gave the statistic there, Margaret Brennan, of which she was doing a rare act of journalisming. I find it interesting that a majority of these perpetrators are Somalians. Her response to the question, though, here about money to terrorist organizations was even worse than that one. Take a listen to Ilhan Omar's response when Margaret Brennan had asked her about the money being funneled to or diverted to terrorist organizations like Al-Shabaab. Take a listen.
House Republicans and the Treasury Secretary just now talked about a link to terrorism, a possible link. He said they're just now beginning to look into it. How confident are you that that's a false claim?
I'm pretty confident at the moment because there are people who have been prosecuted and who have been sentenced. If there was a linkage in that the money that they have stolen going to terrorism, then that is a failure of the FBI and our court system in not figuring that out and basically charging them with these charges. And so I do know that for many years, this sort of like alarm that there is money being transferred through the airport in bags and going to terrorism that accusation has always existed. There's never been here and there in those accusations.
House Republicans and the Treasury Secretary just now talked about a link to.
Okay. So she's pretty confident that it's not true, because if it were true, it would have already been, prosecuted, and that this would be a failure of the FBI and the court system. I mean, yeah, that's kind of the point here. It is a huge failure. This was during the Biden administration. Do you really think Biden's FBI was, busy chasing terrorist groups or chasing fraudsters? No, they were busy chasing people who are pro-life, parents who were showing up to school board meetings. The whole fraud scandal wasn't stopped by Democrat politicians in charge in Minnesota. What makes you think that the FBI or the court system would stop this fraud scandal or stop the funneling of taxpayer dollars to terrorist organizations under Biden's FBI? All Democrat operatives, by the way. Okay, I'm pretty confident that there's been a ton of failure, even at the FBI level and even at the court system level. So, like, her whole thing is like, oh, it's not being sent over there because the FBI would have definitely stepped in here if it was. If not, then that would have been a failure on the FBI. Well, yeah, I'm thinking that it was a failure of the FBI, because the FBI at that time, it's all Joe Biden and you Democrat operatives. I'm sure there's been a ton of failure, and that's part of the problem. So Margaret Brennan, she also spoke with Scott Bessent, and he did not hold back. So let's take a listen to this clip. Here's Scott Bessent on Face the Nation.
A lot of money has been transferred from the individuals who committed this fraud, including those who donated to the governor, donated to Representative Omar, and donated to A.G. Ellison. But they've been transferred to something called MBSs. And those are
mortgage-backed security. What do you mean?
Sorry?
Transferred to what?
These are money the Bureau services, and they are wire transfer organizations that are outside the regulated banking system. And that money has gone overseas. And we are tracking that both to the Middle East and to Somalia to see what the uses of that have been.
Okay, but you have no evidence of that money being used to fuel terrorism at this point, which is what some conservative writers are alleging.
That's why it's an investigation. We started it last week. We'll see where it goes. But I can tell you that, it's terrible. The Representative Omar tried to downplay it, said, oh, it was very, it was very tough to know how this money should be used. Yeah. She was gaslighting the American people.
Well, we'll talk to her.
Yeah, but when you come to this country, you got to learn which side of the road to drive on. You got to learn to stop at stop signs, and you got to learn not to defraud the American people.
Exactly right. He did not hold back. So a lot of money has been transferred from the individuals who committed the fraud. So last week, I told you about 2 immigrants, specifically Somali immigrants, who have connections to Ilhan Omar. Actually, one of them, I think, stole or frauded $5 million. The other one was like $3.2 million, something like that. But they were Somali immigrants, and they didn't, as far as we know, transfer to Al-Shabaab, the terrorist organization, but they used the money through Feeding Our Future, the nonprofit organization that, solicited all these taxpayer dollars or got all these taxpayer dollars. They took that money and they didn't actually use it to feed the hungry children during the pandemic. What they actually did was used it to buy themselves fancy cars and enrich themselves. In fact, one of those Somali immigrants, he had like a front. So it was like an athletic youth center or whatever. It was a website. And he had asked for money from Feeding Our Future for these youths. And apparently he was alleging that he had been feeding the youths 5,000 meals per day or something like that. But he wasn't. He was using the money to feed the children, to enrich himself. Okay, so these individuals who committed fraud like the two immigrants that have connections to Ilhan Omar, they donated to the government, they donated to the governor, they've donated to Representative Ilhan Omar. In fact, one of those immigrants, she had her 2018 campaign campaign party, her victory party when she won in 2018. She had it there at his restaurant. They've donated to A.G. Ellison. This is what Scott Bessent is talking about. This thing goes deep. And Scott Bessent, he said that they've tracked the money from the fraudsters. Okay, they've done wire transfers to organizations that are outside of the regular regulated banking system, and it went overseas. Okay, so they're going in all of these like a Cayman Islands account. Okay, and it can't be tracked, and that's really sketchy. And they're thinking that the reason for that was to kind of take that money, get it outside of the regular banking system, get it into an organization outside, overseas, Cayman Islands account, right? And then that money is then withdrawn from a terrorist organization. And that's what they're investigating right now. They're trying to figure out where that money actually went in these overseas accounts. That's hard to do. And Ilhan Omar, she kind of suggested that you'll never find out because, their overseas accounts, they're not regulated by the regulated by the banking system. And she essentially said, like, you're never going to figure it out, which is odd to me because it's almost like Ilhan needs to be investigated. She needs to be investigated. It's odd that she's coming out and she's downplaying this fraud scandal, gaslighting the American people it's possible that this money sitting in these overseas accounts, these non-traceable accounts, it's odd that she knows that you'll never figure out if those went to terrorist organizations. You know what I mean? So Bessent said that Omar had downplayed the fraud scandal, was gaslighting the American people about how it had been handled. Yes, how this was handled, Tim Walz, the agencies, the state agencies, despite people coming forward and saying, hey, this is going on, you need to stop it, they dismissed those people, or at least as the DHSE, the Department of Human Services employees there in Minnesota, they've come out and said that they didn't just dismiss us, but they retaliated against us and monitored us and surveilled us because we had come out with these allegations or came out with these concerns surrounding the fraud. So Scott Bessent, he summed up the fraud very simply, and I love this. He says, quote, when you come to this country, you got to learn which side of the road to drive on. You got to learn learn to stop at stop signs, and you got to learn not to defraud the American people. See, and I will push back on Scott Bessent a little bit. These people will never learn. I always tell you that our laws are derived from a culture, and that culture is derived from the Bible, Leviticus. Okay, so, and our laws are really, you can trace back every single American law pretty much to everything in Leviticus. People don't like to read it because it's very boring, but it reads like a law textbook, kind of. It's just law, 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 law. And most of our laws in this country can be traced back to all of those that are laid out in the Christian Bible. And these people aren't Christians. So Somalians aren't Christians. They're the exact opposite. And they worship the God of Allah. They do not worship the God Yahweh. So, yeah, they're never going to follow our laws because they follow the laws that are derived from a totally different culture, a totally different religion. So Scott Bessent, he says, you come to this country, you got to learn. They don't want to learn. They don't want to assimilate. They want to bring their culture here. And we've got to stop immigration almost altogether in order to stop this takeover of our Western American culture, our Christian nation. We've got to stop immigration, I think, at this point completely. uh, legal immigration, illegal immigration. We got to stop it, and we've got to put a process in place to ensure that the people who are coming to this country want to assimilate and believe that this culture here, this Christian nationalist culture, is superior. We have to ensure that the people coming here believe that the Christian religion is superior and that the Western culture is superior to all others. So you can say that again. I mean, they've got to learn, but they'll never learn. So that's why I push back on Scott Bessent a little bit there. Anyone we let in should not be committing fraud. Okay. And if they are committing fraud, we shouldn't be letting them into our country. If they have that mentality that breaking laws, and they might not see it as breaking laws. Okay, Indian scammers. Okay, they don't see what they're doing. Those tech people who call you up on the phone. Hello, I would like your social security number and date of birth. Like, they don't see that as wrong because they are in a culture where that's pushed and everybody does it. So, yeah, we shouldn't be letting people in who have a different culture, and they don't even see it as wrong. Maybe these Somalians, and Ilhan Omar alluded to it. She said that they're victims too. Maybe they just don't understand that what they're doing is wrong. They believe truly that they're doing the right thing by frauding America and by taking down America. And by taking down America, you're ripping apart this culture that they believe is inherently inferior to their own. So we have to adopt that mentality as Americans that their culture is inferior to ours. And we have to treat it as such. Because they definitely think our culture, our religion is inferior to theirs. So I want to switch gears here, and I want to talk about Pearl Harbor because yesterday, Sunday, December 7th, marked the 84th anniversary of the attack on the United States by the Empire of Japan at Pearl Harbor. It is, as President Franklin Roosevelt so memorably thundered, a day that will live in infamy. I'm going to take a quick break, smash that like button, share this out with your friends, subscribe to the channel. That would help me out. We're going to come back, talk about Pearl Harbor a little bit. You're listening to Conservative Cat. Hey, good morning. You're listening to the Conservative Cat Show. This is where patriots gather, truth tellers gather, and we have a good time Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. I might go a little shorter today just because I sound terrible. I have a terrible cold. It's cold season. I'm sure you've got a cold too. Throw it in the comment section. What do you do for a cold? What's like your favorite remedy? Mine, I love Vicks Vapor Rub. I don't know what it is. I think that is like the best remedy for colds. Vicks Vapor Rub. I like putting it in a humidifier. I like putting it on my chest, under my nose. I even put it on my feet with some socks on. That's what my mom used to do, and I swear by it. I love Vicks Vapor Rub. I don't know what it is. That and tea, of course. Tea is helpful, but throw it into the comment section. What's your favorite remedy for a cold? You can always support the program by visiting patriotpumpenergy.com, getting your bottle of premium pre-workout today. Here is our fruit punch flavor. This is really good stuff, folks. This is Got creatine in it. Creatine is really good for women. A lot of people think that women shouldn't be taking creatine. I take creatine. I've had to stop taking this because this just has a little bit too much caffeine for me right now, being pregnant. More caffeine than I would like. I mean, I think you're allowed to like 200 milligrams. This is 150, so it's not a ton of caffeine. It's just more than I would like to consume on a daily basis. So I've had to pause my Patriot Pump, and I really miss it because the focus that you get from it with that black pepper extract and the caffeine working together, it provides you like a long-lasting effect, and it makes the caffeine work harder. But there's some creatine in it, some L-citrulline, really good stuff. So go check out our website too. And it's not just a pre-workout company. So what we do, we take some of the profits that are derived or are taken, and we put it towards this show, but we also put it towards men in gyms and ministry. So hosting Bible studies, and that all takes resources. Hosting Bible studies to try to get young men to understand that it's not just your physical man you have to work on, it's your spiritual man. And that is the goal of Patriot Pump, is to get you physically fit. Not that I say people take it and they don't take it and go to the gym, and that's fine. It's supposed to enhance your workout, but some people just take it as an energy enhancer as opposed to the energy drinks with sugar in them. But the goal really of Patriot Pump is to spread this. Actually, it's 2 Timothy. And it's right there on our website. It talks about, feeding your spiritual man and also your physical man. Okay, both are very important. So patriotpumpenergy.com, use promo code conservativecat at checkout. Okay, so President Franklin Roosevelt, and I want to talk about the day that will live in infamy. This was yesterday, December 7th, but this day should definitely be remembered as such, as Franklin Roosevelt had said. It's a day that will live in infamy, yes. Modern Japan today is probably the best ally the United States has in the North Pacific. But remembering that day, though, that's the rub. We have to remember, because now there's only 12 veterans who are still alive. They're all over 100 years old. None of them were able to make the trip out to the annual Pearl Harbor event that they do in Hawaii. So none of them were able to make the trip to Pearl Harbor to mark the occasion this year. The survivors of the 1941 Japanese bombing of Pearl Harbor have long been the center of the remembrance ceremony that they hold there each year. It's on a military base, and there are only 12 alive today. And none of them were able to make the trip out to Hawaii to mark the event, scheduled yesterday for Sunday. So that means everybody who was in attendance had no memories of the attack, okay? Firsthand memories of the attack. So the attack killed more than 2,300 troops and catapulted the U.S. into World War II. We know this. The development is not a surprise and is in evolution of an ongoing trend. Okay. As survivors fade, the descendants and the public are increasingly turning to other ways of learning rather than firsthand memories. So this is a trend that happens with important parts of history. As people die, who have those firsthand memories, people turn to descendants who don't have firsthand memories, or the survivors. As they fade, we turn to other ways to learning about Pearl Harbor. I want to share Ken Schubring. He's 103. A memory that he had. He's a veteran, a Pearl Harbor veteran. He says, quote, "I went to eat breakfast after my duty, and shortly after 8 a.m., an explosion shook our bunkers." He said this at a Veterans Day ceremony. at the National World War II Museum this year. And he said everyone rushed outside. Okay, because the explosion shook the bunkers. And the sky was full of airplanes, dive bombers. I hit the deck, crawled to a ditch nearby, and then I stayed there until the first wave had finished. Okay, so we need to note that it's not just the veterans themselves, but it's the Americans. There are fewer and fewer Americans who remember the attack personally or have like even direct knowledge. These people are 100 centurions. Okay, centurions. Yeah, I think that's centurions. So people who are over 100. Their descendants are, getting up there in age, and as that happens, we definitely need to remember or do our best to brush up on our history and know what that day was all about. We honor the few remaining, the 12 that are remaining, the ancient veterans of that day, because they've definitely earned it, that honor. But we have to understand that the events that led up to this attack, okay, while the United States and Japan were trading partners at one time, we ended up being enemies and fought a brutal years-long war. Okay, so on that note, we should make sure history doesn't repeat itself. Okay, and we look at the Pacific theater now. Like I said, Japan, modern Japan, probably one of our closest allies right now. But we were trading partners, I believe, with them then. And then all of a sudden we fought like a brutal war and we were like nemesis. We were enemies. And we are trading partners now. And we're allies now, but there is drama in the Pacific, and I would say who is becoming increasingly eager to fight us? It's China. So we see it with another nation now, and history is not, exactly repeating itself, but it rhymes, right, with our trading partners now in China. So we have to learn from these things. Pearl Harbor, the attack on Pearl Harbor will, of course, inevitably, as all bits of history do, slip into the mists of history. They'll fade away, and the people involved will also fade. But nevertheless, we have to remember this day. But more importantly, we have to remember the lessons to ensure peace, prepare for war, and nations have no we are not guaranteed permanent friendship with nations. But nations, they have permanent interests. Okay, so we have to remember that. And when we look to the Pacific today, the drama there, I think that China is the most eager to fight with us. And they're our trading partner right now. Not a very good one. So Trump's trying to fix that via the tariffs. Anyway, let's shift gears. Let's talk about the European Union. That is the top story for today. The EU, they dropped a big old fine on X and Elon Musk. Hold on, guys. I'm going to take a sip of water. Like I said, I've got like this crazy cold. Much better. Okay. So their executive body, the European Commission is what it's called. They announced this on X that they were going to issue a fine. Okay, so check this out. They changed it, by the way, their X account. They've got this video up there from 2025, the May 12th, 2025, or 2025. But prior to them actually putting the video up there, you used to click on the video. Oh, it still does it. Okay. So you click on the video and then it goes to the European Commission website. Okay. Fines X. Oh, I said 140 million. They might have changed that number. Euros. Okay. Sorry. So it's 140 million US dollars, I believe. So the commission issued this fine for breaching its Digital Services Act. Okay. So you look at this, you click on the video. I don't even think that you can watch the video. Yeah, you go to click on the video and it just takes them directly to, you can hit play on the video. And I'll do that. We'll go ahead and see what it says here. I didn't even.
Today, the Commission has issued a fine of 120 million euro to X for breaching the Digital Services Act. This is the first ever fine under the DSA. X has indeed breached its transparency obligation under the DSA. This includes X's blue check mark. It deceives users. Anyone can pay to obtain the verified status, and X does not meaningfully verify who is behind it. It also includes X advertising repository, which does not work properly, and X doesn't provide effective data access for researchers. But today's decision has nothing to do with content moderation. It's about transparency provisions for citizens here in the European Union. Today, the Commission has...
Okay, so that's just strange because the video here is dated from May. So anyway, on their X account, it goes directly to their, if you click on the video, it goes directly to their website. It's sort of deceptive because you click on it, it goes to their website, to an article. And I think really the purpose is to fool you, into clicking on the video. You want to listen to the video, but then it directs you to their site and they get more clicks on their site. So they say that X has violated the DSA. The DSA is the Digital Services Act. Now, the Trump administration has slammed the fine and the EU for going after, quote, the American tech platforms and the American people. The days of censorship against America or against Americans are over, says Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Take a look at what he says on X. The European Commission's $140 million fines is not just an attack on X, it's an attack on all American tech platforms and the American people by foreign governments. The days of censoring Americans online are over. That's what Secretary Rubio said. Vice President J.D. Vance also took them to task when the report hit that they were going to fine X the 140 million. Here is what J.D. Vance said on X. Rumors swirling that the EU Commission will fine X hundreds of millions of dollars for not engaging in censorship. The EU should be supporting free speech, not attacking American companies over garbage. So that's what J.D. Vance says about the fine. Now, the Nikita Bayer, okay, this is the X head of product. So the person who was really in charge of X. So this is essentially X responding. And I love the response here from Nikita. Take a listen to this. Here's Nikita and his response, this response. Okay, the irony of your announcement. You logged into your dormant ad account to take advantage of an exploit in our ad composer to post a link that deceives users into thinking it's a video to artificially increase its reach. The link's reach, right? Because if you post a video, you're going to click on the video, but then it takes you to a link and it artificially increases the link's reach, okay? As you may be aware, X believes everyone should have an equal voice on our platform. However, it seems that the rules should not be applied to your account. You believe that the rules should not be applied to your account. Your ad account has been terminated. That was a beautiful response from Nikita. Here we go. Let's see. Yeah, Nikita, he has a great response there. So essentially what he's saying is like, hey, EU, you're doing exactly what you're accusing X of doing just in your announcement. Okay. It's truly a perfect response. They're pointing out how the EU is doing exactly what they're trying to accuse X of doing. The blue check mark isn't deceptive. But the EU post was. This was deceptive. You click on it, you think it's a video, it's actually a link, and it takes you to the website, and they get increased reach on their website. You got to love it. Nice job, Nikita. If the EU wants to play, they're going to find out that that's not a great idea. And what they're trying to say is that, X, the blue check mark is somehow like deceptive because it implies that they are people of an official or elite sort of position or an official position, but you can pay for it. So like I could get a blue check mark and they say that that's deceptive. The blue check mark is not deceptive. If you pay for it, that's some sort of, paywall barrier, and it's not deceptive. They've just kind of rebranded what the blue check mark means on X. It's not just a bunch of elitists, okay? And I think you have to have so many followers or something for a blue check mark. But yeah, they're playing around and they're finding out that it is not a good idea. So Elon Musk, $140 million, because he has failed to control also harmful content. And that is why they are also issuing this fine, the 140 million, because he at X has failed to control harmful content. And Elon Musk's response here is one word. He actually put it out there on X. It was one word. Can you guess what he said? Bullshit. Sorry, excuse my French. He said that it's BS and that the fine violated freedom of speech, which is the bedrock of society. He later tweeted that the EU should be abolished and sovereignty should be returned to these individual countries, so that way those governments can better represent their people. That's what he put out there on X in response to the $140 million fine. And I agree, but Elon, man, abolishing the EU isn't going to help anything. Okay, say you abolish the EU, which I would love to see, because really it's just like a group that controls these individual countries, and these individual countries don't have to answer to their people or represent their people on an individual and interpersonal type relationship. They can just kind of all be a part of the EU, and this EU, takes away these individuals' countries' ability to work with their people and to represent their people. So it's just big government, right? And I'm against that. I don't like the EU, but I don't think abolishing the EU would do much of anything. And it would accomplish nothing in this case. So the real problem here is that the nations that are that comprise or are a part of the EU, the entire English-speaking world minus the United States, and all of these nations in the EU, pretty much every nation except the United States, they do not protect freedom of speech, including Canada, by the way. Okay, there are speech codes. And this is an actual thing, and it allows people to be prosecuted for saying harmful things. And by harmful, I mean anything that might be deemed offensive to Islam or radical ethnic minorities. So I don't think abolishing the EU would do much good. These countries have, and I said this, we have to take note, America, of what Europe has done. There's full-blown like no-go zones. They actually call them no-go zones, where these radically charged Islamists have taken over parts of Europe, and you can't go there as a white person because you will or as a woman in jeans, or as a woman, not in a burqa, because you will die. And they're called no-go zones. Okay. So that's what's going on in Europe. Canada, we're seeing that there. And people are prosecuted when they say something harmful about racial or ethnic minorities. So, as I said before, many European nations have passed laws to criminalize speech. The speech of their citizens, particularly when their citizens say things that might be deemed offensive or offend the feelings of ethnic minorities or religious minorities or nationalist authoritarian groups like radical Islam. Like I said, they believe that their culture is inherently superior, and they are nationalist authoritarian groups. We need to kind of have the same sentiment here, but ours is actually superior, okay, because our laws are actually just, derived from the Christian Bible, and moral. They're just and moral laws. So in Europe, conviction for hate speech could result actually in a prison term. So I got to take a quick break, but we're going to be right back. Smash that like button, share this out with your friends, subscribe. We're going to dig into this a little bit more. The EU issuing a $140 million fine on X. All right, good morning. Smash that like button, share this out with your friends. Before we took the break, I was telling you a little bit about conviction for hate speech could result in Europe prison time. Okay, and hate speech is usually when citizens of that country say something harmful or something that appears to be harmful or hurts the feelings of ethnic minorities or religious minorities. And it doesn't matter if the statement is true. So, for example, here in America, I've got a podcast, right? And I can say things like 59% of marriages in Somalia are cousin marriages. And that's just factual. They marry each other. They marry each other's extended family. And that's just true. And I can say that on this podcast without going to prison. Now, the truth of that statement rarely in Europe rarely matters at a hate speech trial. Okay, so if somebody in Europe were to say, Somalia, well, 59% of their marriages are actually cousin marriages. They could deem that as offensive or harmful. You're calling them yellow hammers, essentially. How dare you? We're going to take you to a hate speech trial. But if you prove that, hey, more than half of marriages over there are cousins, if you can prove that, it doesn't matter. They don't want to hear the facts of that. So there's something called speech codes in Canada, in Europe, pretty much everywhere outside of the United States. And those speech codes not only cover, offensive things that you say about ethnic minorities or religious minorities, but the speech codes also cover citizens' criticism of governments, their policies, and the concept of DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, or objections to climate change. So if you think that the guy should get the job based on merit, not the color of his skin, or should get into college on his merit, not the color of his skin or his sexual preferences, then you could violate a speech code. If you think that climate change is inevitable and, you know, shifting over to electric cars isn't going to do anything, and that the climate ought to change and it should change and it does change all the time, because science, and it's not something that we should use to push an anti-humanist agenda. If you believe that, or if you object to climate change, you can be imprisoned for that. You can violate a speech code in places like Canada and Europe. So, as an aside, I want to stress this. I am talking about government censorship here. The EU is a government body. And I'm not talking about private company restricting speech. Okay. It's not affiliated, or if it's not initiated by the government, that's not censoring free speech or government censorship of free speech. Okay. That's not censorship, as I would call it. Okay. So the EU issuing this fine is censorship. Elon Musk, if he were to moderate and take people off for saying certain things or take certain content off, which he doesn't do a whole lot of because he's not, in the business of private company restrictions, like Facebook was during COVID-19. If you were to post on ivermectin, now that's different. It's not just private company, because Mark Zuckerberg openly admitted that the Biden DOJ and the FBI approached him and urged him to censor people who talked about the election being stolen and censor people who talked about things like ivermectin during COVID. So that would be government censorship, because that censorship is initiated by the government. A private company doing restrictions, like, for example, in the workplace, okay, wherever you work at, State Farm, there in Bloomington, Illinois, there are speech regulations and speech codes that you have to follow. You can't go up to your coworker and say, or cuss at your coworker or call them derogatory names or things like that. There's got to be some sort of class in the workplace, okay? And your private company can restrict your speech in the workplace. I just want to be clear about that, because I don't think a whole lot of people understand. For example, the Charlie Kirk thing, or the Charlie Kirk assassination. There was this Office Depot, I think, that the kid, he said, I don't want to print up your Charlie Kirk posters that said, like, rest in peace on them. Pam Bondi came out and said that she was going to go after Office Depot for not printing the Charlie Kirk posters. That's government censorship. Pam Bondi. Okay. The kid, which was later fired, by the way, by Office Depot, engaging in saying, like, hey, I don't want to make these Charlie Kirk posters for you. That's like private company restrictions. In this case, Office Depot didn't even really direct the individual to do that. But even if they did, it'd be covered under, hey, private company restrictions, rather than that's initiated by the government. There's a big difference. Okay. And I just want to, as an aside, stress that we are talking about speech that is intimidation by the government. And it's also tends to be coupled with assault. So we see it in Europe. We see it even here in the United States, these campuses where, somebody will yell obscenities against Zionists, i.e. the Jews. Zionists are just simply people who believe that Israel should exist as a Jewish state. The assault that happens on these campuses, where people raise their fists in anger at a man wearing, what are those Jewish hats called? A kippah or a yarmulke. That's what it is. I think it's a yarmulke. Those little Jewish hats. Like, usually you'll see The speech that we're talking about is coupled with assault, or it's initiated by the government. So in this case, the European Union, the European Commission here issuing this fine, this is government trying to tell Elon Musk, hey, we don't like the way that you are moderating your platform. We don't like what you're allowing on it, what you're not allowing on it. And he's a private company, and he's engaging in restriction speech, which I don't think Elon does a whole lot of, which is why they're pissed. The EU. He just kind of lets everybody say whatever they want on that platform. So they're pissed because he's not restricting it enough. So that's government censorship. And then you have speech that is coupled with intimidation and assault. Okay, and that is not covered under free speech. And that's the kind of speech I'm talking about that they are all for in Europe. If you engage in something that's like slightly offensive to an ethnic minority or a religious minority specifically, you will be found guilty and thrown in prison. But if you're one of these types that like to shout obscenities at Jewish people on campuses and raise your fist in anger towards a guy wearing a yarmulke, you're fine. If you're coupling your your speech with assault or screaming obscenities, you're not going to be imprisoned, as long as it's a racial minority, directed at a racial minority that isn't Islamist. As long as you're doing that, or against white people or against Christians, like that's all approved over there in Europe and in Canada. So in the EU, we even have political leaders, and I want to get to this story, who disagree with the elite opinions, and they can be prosecuted and punished. And that brings me to a guy that I want to talk about this morning. He's a Dutch politician, and his party is one of the most popular in the nation. Okay, and his name is Geert Wilders. Okay, Wilders has experienced a lengthy pressure campaign from Dutch elites and has been tried twice for his speech. Okay, so political leaders that disagree with elite opinions can find themselves prosecuted. And my point of bringing this all up today is that America is the most free. We have free speech laws. You can't hurt somebody, and actually go after somebody. That's pretty much hurt somebody physically. I'm talking about hurting people's feelings. You can do that. Saying racial slurs, saying you hate things. You can do that here in America. You can't do that in other places. So I want to talk about Geert Wilders. He's a politician. And during his first trial, he faced 5 hate speech charges for inciting hatred or discrimination against Muslims. So like I said, in Europe and Canada, you can go as far as to not just express hatred, but be physically violent with Jewish people, and you're covered. You're fine. You won't be charged with hate laws or free hate speech laws. But if you appear to express hatred or incite hatred or discriminate against Muslims, you will find yourself on trial, just like Wilders did. Okay, so he described Islam as fascist, and he compared the Quran to Mein Kampf. That is what Geert Wilders did. Or Mein Kampf, sorry. Mein Kampf, which is from Hitler, okay? So he said Islam is like fascism. And his punishment ranged from a prison sentence up to a year and a substantial fine. Okay, so he was on trial And the Dutch prosecutors actually tried to decline to prosecute Wilders. Okay, so the prosecutor was like, we don't have much here. We didn't even really want to prosecute this guy. But guess what happened? Okay, in these silly countries like Europe and Canada, you had a 3-judge appeals court panel overrule the prosecutor's objection to wanting to prosecute the guy, Wilders. He's a politician. Okay, so no jurors partook in that decision. Okay, participated in the trial. There were no jurors. It was just a 3-judge panel, and they decided essentially the verdict, the punishment, and they literally acted as a prosecutor, the judge and the jury in this case. So that's what happens in places not of the United States. So the trial here showed some crazy judicial bias, and we're starting to see this more and more in the United States. And I'm constantly saying, "Take note, America! Take note, America!" Okay, so there was some bias here with this case, and I want to talk about it. On the opening day of the first trial here, October 4th, 2010, the presiding judge, Judge Moores, made a snide remark about Wilders, and it became known that Judge Schalken had illegally met out of court with Hans Jensen, an expert witness in the trial, and attempted to influence Hans Jensen, who's the expert witness, to change his testimony to the detriment of Wilder. So you have this judge. He makes a snide remark, clearly doesn't like Wilders, this guy, this Dutch politician. And then this other judge on the 3-judge panel here, and it eventually leads to a new panel of judges. But the old panel, there was a judge on that panel who figured out that that judge, Judge Moores, the one who made this snide remark, went and tried to find an expert witness and change his testimony to the detriment of Wilders. Okay, so this is crazy stuff. So in this meeting, the judge had personally admonished Jansen, the expert. You as an intellect should not be mingling with a chap, i.e. Wilders. Like, you shouldn't be hanging out with this guy. And he's talking. So the Judge Moores, who made this snide remark, he's meeting with this guy, Hans Jansen, the expert witness. He says, you shouldn't be mingling with this guy. The entire appeals court was embarrassed enough to approve Wilder's request for a new judicial panel. Okay. So after this whole meeting happened with Jansen and Judge Moores, so there was a request. Wilder had requested that there be a new panel because of this bias and because of this illegal met out of court meeting with Hans Jansen, the expert witness. So they were embarrassed enough to say, okay, fine, you get a new panel. Great Wilders, or great Wilders. You get a new panel, but they didn't cancel the trial itself. Like here in the United States, what would have happened in that case if a judge was meeting with an expert witness? Mistrial. Like, sorry, we're going to cancel the trial. If a judge was meeting with an expert witness to try to change his testimony to the detriment of the individual on trial, that would not fly here in America. We've got rules against that. So they didn't cancel the trial because there was no need to cancel, you see, because the presiding judge had said, well, it's plausible that this judge tried to influence Jansen, but we don't know for sure because we weren't in the meeting, right? But we can't conclude that the defendant's rights were violated. Okay, so there was definitely a meeting, and that was made clear. So I got to take a quick break. We're going to get to the rest of this story in just a second. You're listening to Conservative Cat. Smash that like button and subscribe to the channel. Okay, smash that like button, share this out with your friends, subscribe to the channel. Appreciate you being here. Before we took the break, I was telling you a little bit about this first trial with these 3-panel judges. The prosecutors essentially said, we don't want to prosecute this Dutch politician because we just don't think we have enough or whatever it was. And then the judges came back and they were like, no, we're going to prosecute him. Then we're going to issue a verdict. So like they are prosecutor, jurors, judges all together. Okay. Not something that you'd see here in America. And that's my point with this this morning, is that this is not something you'd see in America. Okay. You're seeing it in European countries. And I bring this up today because the European Commission issued this fine on Elon Musk and X, 140 mil, essentially because they don't like how Elon X, a private company, is not restricting or regulating as they see, the government sees fit. So that is government censorship. Now, to get back to my little story here, like I said, the judge, one of the judges on the 3-panel judge, the old panel, they had met with an expert witness and tried to change his testimony to the detriment of the defendant. If that were to happen here in America, mistrial, they'd cancel the trial. They didn't cancel the trial here because they couldn't conclude that the defendant's rights were in fact violated. They knew that there was an out-of-court meeting between the judge and the expert witness, but we can't conclude that the defendant's rights were violated. So in 2011, they granted Wilder's request for a new panel. Okay, rightfully so. So the new panel took over in 2011, and prosecutors at that time again recommended they acquit. Hey, we don't have enough here. And this all has to do because Wilder's, he said, hey, Muslims are fascists, and he compared the Quran to Mein Kampf. Okay, and that is why he's on trial here. Okay, so this judicial panel once again ignored the prosecution or the prosecutors in 2011 when they said, hey, we want to acquit. The defense called for Wilder's acquittal in the name of free speech, justice, and democracy. Hey, we should be able to say things like the Quran is crap. Okay, I can say that here all I want on this podcast and not be imprisoned or face a huge fine. So the defense called for an acquittal. Now, the lead defense lawyer for Wilder's had also quipped that he had never seen a trial where the defense could have adopted the prosecution's argument. So the prosecution here made an argument that, hey, there should be an acquittal here, and here's why. And the judges said, nah, we're going to ignore you, and we want to try this guy. We want to prosecute this guy. And he quipped, and he was like, the defense lawyer for Wilder's, he was like, well, I'll just take what the prosecution had recommended, which is an acquittal for these reasons. So in 2011, on June 23rd, the Dutch court had acquitted Wilder's. And their reasoning here wasn't exactly comforting. Okay, so you might think that this is a win, but to sum up their really messed up, convoluted decision, the court said that Wilder's comments about the Quran being Mein Kampf and about Muslims being fascist, even if they met all of the elements of Dutch code, like I said, there are speech codes that you have to follow, were excused because of the context. Okay, the statement's context. Okay, so not that, what he said wasn't hate speech, but it was in the way and manner he said it, and like the where he was at when he said it. And that's why we're not convicting him and we're acquitting him. Okay, so in other words, the court said, we must decide this case not based on the plain evaluation of the elements of the crime. Okay, so the hate speech crime, like I said, he was charged with 5 hate speech crimes for saying that Muslims are fascists and the Quran is Mein Kampf. He was charged with those. But they also had to review and weigh the following factors. The court: who said the statement in question, where the statement was made, what statements preceded the specific statement. So what did he say after the fact? After he said the Quran was Mein Kampf, after he said Muslims were fascist, and why was the statement made? Okay, so they had to include all of those factors in their decision making. They couldn't just go off Dutch speech code. And only if the elements of the speech crimes were met and the contextual factors that I just laid out for you, if all of those contextual factors were met, then you could do some sort of punishment and the defendant could be convicted, not acquitted. Okay, so bottom line, this Geert Wilders fella, he was the leader of the majority party in parliament. Okay, he had a leader of a major party in parliament. Because of other context, not because, hey, he said that, he was not convicted for his harmful speech. Had he said it in some other context, the context, of course, is that he's a politician and that he's rich. Okay, really, that's what I think it is. If there was some Dutch schlub, who wasn't a parliamentarian or a leader of a major political party, and he was, a little bit more reckless with his speech, he'd be in prison. But because of who this guy was, Geert Wilders, because he was a leader of a major party, because he had said it in a certain context, he didn't get convicted. So, I mean, it's so wild to think, because you and I say the Quran's stupid. I say that it is. I mean, it's like Mein Kampf. If you ever read it, it's very violent. And there's a difference between the God Yahweh, I am, and Allah, which translates to the God. So Yahweh, I am, is the Hebrew translation. And really what this God is all about is justice and mercy and an interpersonal relationship with you. Even the Jewish people, they worship the same God. They don't recognize Jesus Christ. And I pray for the Jewish people that they bend the knee and profess Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior. And if they do that, I think that this whole infighting in the Middle East would cease. I think that it would end. If not only the Jews, but the Muslims were to bend their knee and profess Jesus Christ as Lord. And if the Muslims were to recognize Allah, or Yahweh rather than Allah, as the true God, all of this would stop. This fighting, this division. But anyway, so Yahweh is a personal God. Somebody that is, so Moses, take the New Testament out of it. Moses, he had a relationship with God. There were prophets in the Old Testament who had relationships with God, personal relationships, and they saw God. Okay, heard from God. Allah does not do that in the Quran. In fact, Allah is just a God of mercy, okay, not a God of justice. And the Quran calls for people here to seek their own justice. So justice is mine, saith the Lord, is, Allah, or Yahweh, not Allah. Justice is not his, justice is yours, okay? And that is why the Quran is so violent, because it's so fascinating when you hear the chants, no justice, no peace. Okay, so what they're really saying is that justice is mine. I'm going to seek justice, and I'm going to obtain it by whatever means possible. Because my God is not a God of justice, but rather a God of just mercy. So this is... why did I bring this up? Oh, because he says that, hey, Wilder says that the Quran is like Mein Kampf. It directs people to take justice into their own hands. Okay. And to take what's yours, which is fascism. Okay. To take justice into your own hands for the greater good, for peace. And, this guy, he skirted punishment by the skin of his teeth because he was a parliamentarian, and because he was, not super reckless with his speech. He spoke it in a context that allowed him to skirt prosecution or punishment. Okay, so if it was just some schlub, he would be sitting in prison, most definitely. And if he was a little bit more reckless with his speech, he'd be sitting in prison. Here in America, we can say the Quran is comparable to Mein Kampf, okay, without getting arrested. I can say that right now. Nobody's going to come arrest me here in the United States. I can say Muslims are fascist, which is what Geert Wilder said. And it should disturb Americans that these types of speech codes are coming to America. More and more, I get nervous to say things like the Quran is like Mein Kampf. I have a Karl Marx series that I've done. I was nervous to kind of do that one because it's very much anti what you're taught in colleges, public universities. They give you Karl Marx ideology, philosophy, and they say that is a good, decent, and just philosophy, Karl Marx socialism. I get nervous, things that I say on my podcast, because more and more I'm starting to see these types of speech codes coming to America. And it's not just through the X fines from the EU. We saw President Barack Obama and Joe Biden. Certain speech was punished, sometimes by skirting the Constitution and law, and other times blatantly in a unconstitutional and illegal manner. People were prosecuted, convicted, punished for their speech under the Biden administration and Barack Obama. For example, in 2012, the Obama administration used to stage demonstrations in the Arab world to go after used some stage demonstrations in the Arab world to go after California-based filmmaker. This filmmaker had made an amateur film depicting the Muslim prophet Muhammad in a negative light. The filmmaker was ultimately jailed for probation violations, but there were staged demonstrations in the Arab world to go after this California-based filmmaker, and that was all done under the Biden administration. And they jailed this filmmaker in 2012. Then the Biden administration, and I don't even think I have to remind you of this because it's so fresh and new in your mind, but maybe some of you forgot. The federal government, acting at the behest of the Biden administration and left-wing politicians and government elites to oppose President Donald Trump, they deplatformed critics of left-wing elites and left-wing ideologies. Me being one of them. I was censored, deplatformed. I've been here since, 2021? And I was deplatformed because I said things like ivermectin. I said things like the election was stolen. Anything that opposed left-wing ideology, they deplatformed because it was to oppose President Donald Trump, and they censored people in an effort to rig the election, really. And Mark Zuckerberg came out and said at the direction of the FBI, he did these things. So, unfortunately for you and I think that the next president, Democrat president, we are most certainly going to see this disturbing trend of censorship, of jailing people like Barack Obama did in 2012, this filmmaker who was jailed for probation violations. I think we're going to see more of the same if we get a Democrat president in 2028. I don't think it's likely that we will. I'm sure it's going to be J.D. Vance, but we'll have to see. Smash that like button, share this out. Oh gosh, look, this is just so sad. You look Jewish. I'm not Jewish. I'm a Christian. Christ is king. I truly believe that the Jewish people need to bend their knee and profess Jesus Christ as Lord. But biblically, we serve the same God the Father. Okay, so don't know if you're a Christian. You're brown. Okay, you're crazy. Got some trolls here in this morning. Absolutely insane. It's so sad, the right, and I like Nick Fuentes. I do. I like some of his. I watched Steven Crowder and Nick Fuentes. I like some of the things that Nick Fuentes says. Theologically, I disagree with Nick Fuentes. I'm a Protestant Christian, and Catholics are of the belief that you don't really need to read the Bible. And you can just listen to your priest, some Catholics, I shouldn't say all, but hey, the Bible lays it out that, hey, you bless Israel, you'll be blessed. And I'm not saying that we should get into forever wars in the Middle East on Israel's behalf, or that we should be trusting of the Israeli government. Definitely not. But it's really sad to see kind of like this division on the right. And really, it's a place of different theologies. My theology is just different. Doesn't mean that I hate Catholics. I think that you're wrong, or that people that believe that, the new covenant replaces this old covenant. Okay, that would just mean that, and I have this amazing video you guys can go see with Pastor Timothy James Farrell in the archives and other pastors. But the new covenant doesn't replace that old covenant. God, I am of the belief that God fulfills the new covenant and Jesus was a fulfillment of the law. And yeah, it's just kind of sad that there's this division on the right, and it really just comes from different theologies. And I think that if people were to just read the dang book, the basic instructions before leaving Earth, the Bible, we wouldn't have this infighting going on the right. So anyway, I gotta take a quick break. Smash that like button, subscribe to the channel. We're gonna come back. We're gonna talk about this is fascinating. This is guaranteed income. Something that Cook County, Illinois has done, where they're going to take taxpayer dollars and give it to people in the form of income. And these people don't have to be working. They also don't have to be United States citizens. I'm going to take a quick break. I'll be right back. Hey, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel. I so do appreciate you being here. Now I want to get to this. Democrats playing in your wallet with your money as if it's monopoly money, okay? So Cook County, they just rolled out what's called a guaranteed income program. This is free money every month, to people with no work requirement, not working, no citizenship requirement, no accountability. And guess what? Governor J.B. Pritzker says he doesn't want to do that at a state level. So this is in Cook County for now. He was asked about this, and he says he's not going to do it at a state level. But he also said that Cook County, should try things out. Okay, so he didn't come out and condemn this policy. No. He didn't say it was irresponsible. And I don't know about you, but this screams irresponsible to me. This is a $10 billion county budget, and they're taking $7.5 million of it, and they're carving it out for a no strings attached cash handout to people who aren't working and to people who might not be citizens. So strap in. This is a wild one. Let's start with Cook County, Illinois. This is the home of high taxes, potholes, large enough to swallow up your Prius. And now they have a $7.5 million budget line item on their 2026 budget. It's for guaranteed income. Now, this isn't a new idea. We've kind of already done this. So there's $42 million in federal COVID money handed out in the form of, and I don't know if you guys got this, $500 monthly payments to 3,250 families. This was in Cook County. So $42 million from the feds in COVID money. Now, that was handed out to 3,250 families. Now, the county board president, Tony Preckwinkle, says that was successful. What? What world are you living in there, Preckwinkle? Tony, successful how? Getting votes, dependency, expanding government, 42 million, giving bureaucrats warm fuzzies. I don't know how that was successful. We had crazy inflation. I didn't agree with the COVID payments. Fully. I mean, the government should have just never shut down, right? You let people simply keep what they earn and keep their jobs. You don't take their jobs away from them, and we wouldn't have had to issue any kind of payments out and inflate things and go through an inflationary period that was just abysmal. Okay. Nobody looked at the metrics of this thing and said, hey, does this grow the economy? Does it strengthen families? Does it lift people out of poverty long term? Nobody wants to talk about those. The answers to all those questions is no. But really what these payments are guaranteed income, cash handouts, what it guarantees is votes. And I'll be critical of President Donald Trump for a second here. I think that the COVID handouts were silly. Kind of needed in that the government was taking people's livelihoods away. Okay, so if they're going to take your livelihood away, then yes, you do have to pay people. And we were shifting towards a socialist communist type government where they were giving you your income and you weren't allowed to work. When you do that, then yes. But this was right around when he was supposed to get elected again, 2020, right? And COVID, of course, we know it came from Wuhan, and that was probably China trying to keep Trump out of office. Look at what a thorn in their sides he's been since his second term. We are looking at no income tax because of the tariff revenue anyway. But maybe a small part was, hey, let's give out the COVID money, and that would buy goodwill from the people heading into an election. Okay, so it's not in Cook County. This is not a coinky-dink. Okay, there are primaries coming up, and Cook County just approved this unanimously, and that tells you how far things have kind of gotten here, where this is a one-party socialist laboratory, and it's known as Chicago governance, okay? The moderates didn't even blink. They said, okay, yeah, let's pass this. I'll tell you why. It buys goodwill from the people going into the primaries. That's what this is about. It's about buying votes. Now, Governor J.B. Pritzker, he gets asked this question, according to the Center Square. Governor, are you using state taxpayer dollars for guaranteed? Are we going to start using taxpayer dollars for guaranteed income like Cook County is? And he says no. But then, in classic Pritzker fashion, he immediately follows up with, quote, from the Center Square, well, it's not inappropriate for counties to try things. And then he says, sometimes things you don't imagine would work do work. That's what he says. Okay, so no, I'm not eating the donut. I'm just licking the frosting off the donut. Okay, that's essentially the political version of that sentiment. So the governor, he wants to appear as moderate, and he's been doing this recently since there's been whispers about him running in 2028 for the presidential nomination on the Democrat ticket. He's been trying to kind of gain favor with the moderates, but him rejecting the statewide income plan, but he still kind of gives a wink to the progressives here. Okay, so who would want to expand welfare like that? So although he said something that would sound conservative if it were coming from anybody else except the guy who like taxes the air we breathe, I don't believe it, not for a second. Okay, I think that if he loses 2028, the first thing that he's going to do would be some sort of guaranteed income at a state level for people with like lower income. That's the only requirement, I believe, for this in Cook County is lower income people. They get guaranteed income. No work requirement, no citizenship requirement. And he said this, and like I said, this is something that sounds conservative. The no to state income, guaranteed income, that sounds conservative. That sounds fiscally responsible. And then Pritzker says this, I think we should be providing jobs, and the dignity of work really matters. That's what JB said, which is surprising to me. Okay, JB, you are all about jobs and whatnot. Stop strangling small businesses with these taxes. Stop strangling employers with regulations and hiking up taxes on job creators, the corporate income tax. Okay, and you're forcing young families to flee the state. To states like Indiana, Missouri, South Carolina, my case. Okay, so you can't preach dignity of work and simultaneously make working impossible. Okay, and that's what JB has done. He's made it impossible for employers to actually employ people and for people to make money. Okay, because you just keep taxing them. Hence the what is it? The tolls. He just raised the tolls. There were more tax increases to bail out the Chicago Transit Authority. So tax hikes, gas taxes, they're diverting taxes, gas taxes, tax revenue to CTA, which inevitably means that our roads are going to get crappier. So in enter, and I'm reading through the Center Square article, Anthony DeLuca. So this is a Democrat, and this is fascinating. He filed something called the Prohibition on Taxpayer-Funded Guaranteed Income Act, House Bill 60. Okay. Now, he doesn't outlaw these programs, income programs. Okay. He just said that if you want guaranteed income, fine, but you can't use taxpayer dollars. Here's where I think we're going to go with this. Okay, they might do something like guaranteed income at a state level, and it might not be derived from taxpayer cash, but you could have a situation where if somebody gets laid off, you have to guarantee that person's income from that company, so that private company, and mandate companies to provide income to people who are like laid off, fired, and like to an extent, there's like some sort of severance packages, like those already currently exist, but they could go a step further. And that's what I think the Democrats are going to wind up doing. It's a little bit less bad than what Cook County did, which was like, we're just going to allocate $7.5 million out of our budget and give it to people without any work requirement or anything like that. What I could see Democrats doing is saying, oh, we're going to outlaw these types of guaranteed incomes programs derived from taxpayer dollars. But what we're going to do is force companies to pay people who they isn't. What you'll wind up seeing is people get into jobs, they lose the jobs, or they don't show up to work. And Amazon, for example, would be required by state law to pay an income for that person who used to be on their payroll for a certain period of time, which already kind of happens through severance packages, but it would be more. You know what I mean? So that's what I think Democrats are leaning towards in the state house. So it's not the full kit, it's not the whole kit and caboodle, but it's bad, right? We don't want to be forcing that. You want companies to leave, you want to not provide jobs for people. If you do something like that, that's going to guarantee businesses leaving the state. Forcing, I could imagine they're going to say like, the rich need to help the poor, and this idea of forced charity, right? So DeLuca, he's quoted and he's saying here, quote, people feel like they're getting nickel dime at every level of government. So what you're going to start to see here, so there's not this violent uprising, which I think in Illinois that we're very close to some sort of uprising. Okay. And I think that JB sees the writing on the wall. I think that's why he wants to, achieve his national aspiration or ambitions, and go for a higher office. I think that he sees that, there's the people have been pushed to a breaking point here, and we're in a mess. And I think that you're going to start to see Democrats saying, okay, well, people are really pissed at the government right now. What are we going to do to keep giving them cash, but not nickel and diming them at every level of government, and taking their money away, but then giving them pennies? We're probably going to have to force the private sector to do the cash handouts. I think that could happen. Yes, everyone is afraid to say this. People are being nickel and dimed at every level of government in the state of Illinois. People are afraid to say that. But the remedy is not going after, and I'm not saying that this is Anthony DeLuca's this is my prediction, that eventually Democrats are going to start to mandate the private sector to do these cash handouts that they like to do in order to buy votes. And that's going to really push businesses away. So they're outright just going to make private companies provide guaranteed income to people, despite them not working for those private companies. Okay, so the gubernatorial candidate, Ted Dabrowski, quoted in the Center Square, he didn't hold back. He calls the Cook County Guaranteed Income Program, quote, a prime example of recklessly misguided welfare. And he points out correctly that the program does not have work requirements and there is no citizenship requirement. So let me repeat that. No work requirement, no citizenship requirement. So your tax money, your sales taxes, your gas taxes, every fee imaginable, the tolls going up, it is funding a system where somebody can simply show up and get paid, like for breathing. Okay. And Dabrowski warns that this normalizes dependency. Of course it does. That's the whole point. Government becoming daddy, mommy, employer, savior, ATM, all at once. And then the people will never vote against that. They will never vote against a government that becomes mommy, daddy, employer, savior, ATM. Okay. It is politics by sedation. You keep the people calm with these monthly payouts while taxes go up, schools collapse, crime spikes, and families flee. But you sedate them with these monthly payouts and get them to keep voting you in, because there is a very delicate balance between uprising and sedated people. Right now, Illinois is in a position of sedation, where I think that we're getting very close to some sort of uprising, which is why you're seeing Governor J.B. Pritzker flee to the national stage. So for our Christian worldview portion of the show, Proverbs 14:23 says, "In all toil there is profit, but mere talk leads only to poverty." Okay, so scripture repeatedly emphasizes the value of work. Okay, not as punishment, but as dignity. Okay, not as drudgery, but as dignity. 2 Thessalonians 3:10 says this: "If anyone is not willing to work, let him not eat." So the Bible teaches, yes, generosity, but it does not teach government forced redistribution, divorced from responsibility, community, relationship, and stewardship. So forced charity, forcing taxpayers into charity. Charity is one thing. State-sanctioned dependency is another thing. So Christian compassion lifts people up a social welfare system, traps them there. So imagine if the government ran your household. Okay, imagine for me, for a quick second, close your eyes. And they ran your household like this guaranteed income system. Your teenager walks in and says, "Mom, Dad, I'm not going to get a job. I'm not going to do chores. I'm not going to clean my room, but I do expect $500 a month." Right? You'd laugh. You'd think, "Oh, you inhaled way too many TikTok fumes there, bucko." Okay. But when Cook County does the same thing and asks for the same deals from taxpayers, suddenly it becomes a innovated public policy, and it's worth trying out according to Governor J.B. Pritzker, and it might just work. The guaranteed income in Cook County. I won't do it at a state level, but it might just work for the Cook County people. No, you'd laugh. This is laughable. If this was done in your own household, guaranteed income, like having a guaranteed income system. Okay. So here's the truth that politicians won't tell you out loud. Guaranteed income equals guaranteed more taxes. Money doesn't appear from the ether, or it doesn't come from trees. Okay. Every dollar Cook County hands out is a dollar taken from a family who's paying $12,000 in property taxes, from a single mother who's traveling 30 minutes to a job, crossing 2 county lines, a retiree who can't afford to leave because their house can't get sold because it's Illinois. Nobody wants to live here. You've got a business owner who has already lost employees to Iowa, Wisconsin, struggling to keep his business afloat. They're going to take more money from that guy, that business owner. So the money doesn't appear from the ether. And this is why Illinois families leave. This is why U-Hauls are going out, not in. Guaranteed income is not compassion. It's an admission. We messed up the economic system so bad. And we have caused people to live in poverty. And now we have to pay people just to survive within it. That is a guaranteed income is an admission. So in closing, it's noble to help people who fall on hard times. Churches do that every single day, but government dependency is not the solution. If somebody is truly struggling, I would highly, and my parents did this, they got help from church, and I'm not saying that you abuse the church, but people who fall on hard times are typically taken care of by their communities. And we're trying to replace that with government dependency, and that is not the solution. It is quicksand disguised as a lifeboat. So what Illinois lawmakers should be doing is reducing taxes, obviously, creating jobs. Now, Illinois, they try to do this, but they always bring crappy companies in that don't work, like startups or like electric vehicle companies that are dead within a few months because there's no demand for electric vehicles. So if you want to create jobs, you can provide tax incentives for companies that actually produce a product that is in demand. I don't like the whole Shark Tank idea of government. I'd love for the free market to just do what the free market does. But I get it. We should be encouraging entrepreneurship to a certain extent. So we've got to fix crime. That's what Illinois lawmakers should be doing, strengthening families, supporting the dignity of work instead of paying people, for no reason or with no responsibility, accountability, no work requirement. Our founders fought for a world where you can pursue your own calling, and you are called by God to pursue your calling. Okay, your purpose with your God-given talents. God gives you talents. You should use them to further his purposes for your life. And that's real freedom. Okay, so we should pursue our callings and we should work. Okay, and what this does, it de-incentivizes work completely. What's the point of working if you're going to have guaranteed income for doing nothing? Okay. All right. Smash that like button, share this out with your friends, subscribe to the channel, hit that like button. Here we go. Reduce taxes for people who want to pay other people's way of life, and increase tax for people who like to throw money around like fools. Yeah, if there was a way to, not tax conservatives and tax liberals, I think that's where you're getting at. That would be an interesting policy. Yeah, tax liberals only. And then, really and it's sad because you look at this and these people just don't get it. They go about it a totally different way. They really just want to depend on government. It comes from a place of not being I hate to say it, a Christian. Not that I hate to say it, but it's a fundamental difference between two ideologies. That, hey, my source comes from God, those on the right, or comes from me, individualism. And then on the other side, you have collectivism. My source comes from government, and I want to depend on government. And there's just no way we try every day to pull these people over to our side and to get them to a place of real freedom. But it's fascinating. It's kind of like they are willing to give up their freedoms for convenience, which is really sad. Okay, so Christians are not under any covenant or prophecy. Our promise waits for us in heaven. And so the new covenant, the old covenant that I'm talking about for believers, yes. What I was talking about is the new covenant is like, hey, profess Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior over your life. You enter into eternity. The old covenant, that I'm referring to is God saying to Abraham, hey, your descendants are going to be blessed, and I'm going to bless you with a nation. And you guys are going to have your nation, and your descendants will be blessed. And he makes also another promise to Ishmael. And if you guys haven't seen it, you guys can go check it out in the archives. It's called Isaac, Ishmael, and Emmanuel. It's a show that I did, and it kind of describes all of this. It's really just a family feud. Ishmael, his descendants are those who are Arabs, promises many nations, but not the nation of milk and honey, this blessing, and has promised, the descendants of Abraham, which are the Jewish people, abundance, eventually leading to the birth of Jesus Christ, who came out of Abraham's descendant or lineage. Jesus is a part of that. And the old covenant says, like, hey, I'm going to keep you in your land. Now, covenants, the definition, let me just pull up the definition of a covenant. And this is where we kind of differ with Protestant Christian would differ with a Catholic. And I'm not a theologian by any sense, but it is an agreement. Okay, if God says it's going to be, then it is. Even if you've got Catholics or some denominations and Christians that hold the belief that the old covenant has been abandoned, and the only thing that we should listen to is this new covenant. And that's just not looking at the whole picture of the Bible, okay? The new covenant is a central Christian belief, a spiritual promise from God, established through Jesus Christ. And they say that it replaces the Mosaic law, okay, the old covenant, offering forgiveness, internal transformation, then the new covenant, and a direct relationship with God via the Holy Spirit. All of that is true, but there is this old covenant that I don't believe, and I don't know, God is a God of promises and a fulfillment of that promise to the Jewish people was Jesus Christ. And I think it just fulfills prophecy, the new covenant. So, yeah, there's this theological barrier, and you've got people on the right who are at each other like this, like Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson. Charlie Kirk was a Protestant, okay, for many reasons, but he also held this belief that Gentiles are adopted into this through the new covenant. There's not just abundance and blessing for the Jewish people, but Gentiles, anybody, through Jesus Christ, is kind of adopted into this family of eternity, if you profess Jesus Christ as Lord. But he is a fulfiller. I believe God is a promise keeper, and he made a promise, an old covenant, that, hey, I'm going to keep you in this land. Okay, and in I think it was the 1940s, he has in somewhat recent history, we saw the Jewish people scattered all over from war, and then they always come back to this Jewish state. And seeing that play out in history, that tells me that, okay, God is keeping not only this old covenant, but the new covenant is a fulfillment of that old covenant, and it's not replacing the old covenant. So, for example, what was it? Scripture talks about fulfillment of the law. Jesus, this is in your Bibles in red. And I'm not a pastor, okay? So I'm just telling you where I see a divide amidst the right. And it's really sad because really it's a theology thing. And I think if we were to just crack open our Bibles, this dispute on the right would be over. So the fulfillment of the law refers to Matthew 5:17. Or wait, I think that's 5:17. Yeah. Jesus, hang on, I'm looking for the verse because I don't know it off the. Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but fulfill them. Okay. So there is a prophetic promise to Abraham and the descendants. I'm kind of getting into theology now, so I should probably stop. But point is, there's this infighting on the right, and it comes from this. the new covenant replaces the old covenant. Well, that's not kind of how a covenant works. And that's not how God works. Once he says something, he's going to fulfill that promise. Okay, so I am just of that Protestant belief. So you don't need to be a pastor to study the Bible. Yeah, appreciate it. Yeah, I think I have a different position than a lot of people, or some people on the right, and there's this infighting going on. It's really sad to see, because we should all kind of put that aside, because it's a theology difference. But it's really causing some problems in this movement. This movement to get people to profess Jesus Christ is King. I think that we all want people to profess Jesus Christ is King. It's stopping us from that ultimate goal. This faith movement, this movement on the right, because we're fighting with each other over this nuance. And, I believe that I'm right. But yeah, anyway, subscribe, go ahead, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel. I'll be back tomorrow morning, bright and early. Talk to you later.